Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's Wednesday Wisdom guest. But first, as always, we want to acknowledge our sponsors. These are all companies that I used as an athletic director. You should be using them too. So don't hit that fast forward button. Stay with us for the next 3 minutes as we give our sponsors their shout out. Here we go. We want to say thanks to our good friends at SnapRaise for their support of the podcast. Go to snapraise.com, hands down the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our school with great success, and you will too. It works. That's snapraise.com. We also want to thank Gipper, the official social media graphics solution for the podcast. Go to Gipper.com. Their team is going to help you create world-class content to celebrate your athletes and promote your teams. It's used and trusted by over 3,000 athletic programs across the country. It's professional graphic design made simple. That's Gipper.com. We also want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards or your school's Hall of Fame, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. If you mention the podcast, they'll give you a nice discount. vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. If you're not using a survey to take the pulse of your parents or your student athletes, you're really missing out. Athletic Surveys is going to connect you with the complainers, but they're also going to connect you with the 98% that support your program. And that data is tremendously valuable when you're talking with a frustrated parent or maybe your principal. Go to athleticsurveys.com to get started. We want to thank Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We want to say thanks to Huddle. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school is a Huddle school, and our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided that let them coach our kids up to their highest level. Go to huddle.com and join the 8 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thanks to Sideline Interactive indoor score tables and video boards. You've heard me say before, probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Go to sidelineinteractive.com for more information. That's sidelineinteractive.com. And we want to thank Home Campus. As an athletic director, I used Home Campus every single day for things like scheduling, student athlete eligibility and clearance, digital form signatures, coaches, parents, you name it, Home Campus does it. To get started, all you have to do is go to homecampus.com. That's homecampus.com. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast. This is episode number 102, and we've got one of our regulars with us, Julie Kelly. Regular listeners will recognize Julie's athletic director at Providence Classical Christian Academy. I started to stumble there in Arkansas. She's also a certified athletic administrator, very active in her state, also getting active at the national level too. Does a great job with her program, and we're excited to have her back on Wednesday Wisdom. So, Julie Kelly, what do you have for our listeners this week?
Well, thanks again, Jake. It's good to see you. Being a relatively new athletic director, while I've been in athletics for a really long time, over 13 years now, one of the things that I've noticed that when I'm interviewing, and then also in my current role, that is emphasized a great deal is communication. We can never be good enough at communication. In athletics, we just talked about a few minutes ago how we're on a snow day. So there's a lot of things that have come into play as far as rescheduling, working transportation, talking to other schools, talking to our parents. And so communication is a huge part of that. And so today I just want to talk a little bit how, as an athletic director, that should be one of our top priorities in making sure that we're communicating with all of our stakeholders. One of the best things that you can do as far as an athletic director is to listen. Sometimes we already have a plan. We're trying to figure out what the next step is. But when you're talking to parents, when you're talking to coaches, when you're talking to students, it's best to just listen first before you come up with a plan, because you can't really communicate until you understand what the other person is trying to convey to you. The other thing about that is when you're communicating to someone, your body language is super important. With technology, it's really easy to be distracted because we have immediate access when we're carrying our phones. You know, our coaches are trying to get in touch with us. We get notifications from our apps. And the temptation is to look down at your phone, to look at your computer. Even on Zoom calls, sometimes I notice that when we're in Zoom meetings that there are people that are doing other things. And so your body language is important. It's important to make sure that the person that you're visiting with has your complete attention, that they don't feel like you're being distracted. And then another part of that communication is email and text. So we all communicate differently. We know that it's hard to detect tone in text and email, any kind of digital communication. And so I know for females, we tend to overly communicate and say too much. Sometimes it's better that we just be brief and specific. However, sometimes males are too brief and they don't give enough details, or they might send a check mark or a thumbs up or something like that. It's highly important that when you're reading an email or a text and someone has asked you a question, that you're responding to the information, not giving out too much information, and that the tone comes across as being pleasant, because sometimes that's part of the conflict that we have, is that we didn't go back and reread something before we hit send. So, and you know, another thing too, we're all super busy. We have a lot of things going on, is that a lot of information is coming in. I know sometimes my brain feels like it's on a hamster wheel and it's just going crazy because I'm doing lots of different things. But it's important that if I get information that I know I need to follow up on, and I'm in the middle of something, I need to write it down. If I don't have a pen and a notepad with me, then I try to put it in my notes, or I send myself a text saying, follow up on this. I think sometimes it's not that people don't want to communicate. It's just that we have a lot of things going on in our life and a lot of distractions. And sometimes we just get sidetracked. So if you can write something down, write it down. And one other part about communication too is there are a lot of instances where it is great to send an email. It's great to send a text. Sometimes I feel like we hide behind that because it's easy, it's quick, and honestly, sometimes we don't always like the conflict and we try to avoid it. But the truth is, it's really better if we can just pick up the phone and handle something. I know a lot of times people appreciate the fact that you took the time to call. They can hear your tone and the situation is being dealt with right then. And usually you can get that done a lot quicker than by sending a text or an email. And then, you know, when you're in conversation, sometimes our tendency is to jump right in and respond to something, especially if we have strong feelings about a subject. But I think it's all right to pause sometimes and take a second or two and just think about, how do I really want to respond to this, especially when you're dealing with heated subjects, or you're dealing with someone who's very emotional. Sometimes it's all right just to listen, to pause, and to think before you respond, just to make, it's hard to take something back once it's already came out of your mouth. So just the patience of, I'm going to make sure that what I'm saying is accurate before I jump in there and say something.
Boy, you just did an entire lesson on AD 101. A couple of things. The listening, I've said many times, it's one of, if not the most important part of communication. And it's a tool, if you will, that I failed to learn how to use properly until too late in my career. You know, you mentioned just jumping in and responding. That was my style. A parent would come in and maybe they've shared their heart for about 10 seconds. I'm already coming up with 6 different solutions
Uh,
for a problem that didn't even exist. And basically, all they were doing is just kind of venting. And when I
mhm.
finally learned to shut up and listen, I think I became a much better athletic director. And the
Well, sometimes too, people don't always want a solution. Sometimes they just want to be heard.
No, absolutely right. And another thing that you mentioned that really stuck out for me, that again, I wish I had learned this earlier, was you get that email or you get that voice message from let's say it's a frustrated parent. I'm sure that never happens to you. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And our initial response, I think sometimes is to reply, to text back
Mm.
or email back. And what I learned to do finally, the last couple of years I was an AD, was to call that person up. Hey, I got your email. Do you got a minute? And it's hard to do. We're fearful a little bit of that conversation, but I would say almost every single time the person was grateful that I called
Mhm.
them back. And it was something that they were just letting off steam. That's why it went on for 16 paragraphs. But it was something very easily rectified instead of, sitting overnight, sitting for 3 days, or you send back an email. What are they going to do? They're going to
Right.
email back and it's back and forth. So just making that phone call, like you said, it's so valuable. It's tough to do, but once you break through, once you do it that first time, it becomes so much easier.
Right. And, a lot of times most people don't really want conflict. When someone comes to you, whether it's a coach, whether it's a parent, they don't really want to engage in conflict. They just really want to be heard and to make sure. And I think sometimes when we send emails and things like that, we make assumptions of what the other person is thinking, what they're saying, what they think of us. But really, when you have that conversation, either over the phone or in face to face, you recognize our hearts are usually pretty much the same. It's just working through that and talking through that.
No, absolutely spot on. Julie, I know it's an incredibly busy time for you. Rescheduling games. As we record this, you're currently under snow.
Yeah.
But we always talk about the importance of networking. And if one of our listeners wanted to reach out, add you to their network. And listeners, you've got a great resource here. Julie, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
My email is AD, as in athletic director, at providence-academy.com.
Okay. And that's in the great state of Arkansas.
Yeah.
Julie Kelly, thanks again for sharing with us. All the best as we hopefully move through winter sports and on to spring. Spring's coming at some point. And thanks again for sharing with our listeners today on Wednesday Wisdom.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you letting me be here.
Oh, absolutely. To our listeners, we appreciate you. And we want to remind you that we upload the Zoom recordings to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. If you take a look at this episode when we upload it, you're in for a nice little surprise. And our sponsors have been good to us. For the first listener that sends me a text or an email and tells me what's unique about this video recording, we're going to send something nice your way. And when I say nice, I mean some cash. So tell me what's different about this Zoom recording. And getting back to Wednesday Wisdom, we do this every single week. And just about every day, we bring you some new content and some best practices on the Educational AD Podcast. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. The great Julie Kelly, Providence Classical Christian Academy in Arkansas. Before we go, as always, we want to acknowledge our sponsors. Don't fast forward. Listen to them one more time. If you're not using these companies, I really encourage you to do so. We want to say thanks to Home Campus. Go to homecampus.com. It's something you will use every single day as an athletic director. We want to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. We'd like to thank Huddle. As a football coach, I used Huddle. As an AD, we were a Huddle school. Go to huddle.com to see all the things they can do for you, your coaches, and your student athletes. We'd like to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic Surveys will let you take the pulse of your student athletes, your coaches, and your parents. Go to athleticsurveys.com. We'd like to thank Hometown Ticketing. the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Go to hometownticketing.com. If you're looking for a fundraiser, stop right here. Go to snapraise.com. Hands down, the best online fundraiser out there. Snapraise.com. We want to thank Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. They're going to help you bring your school's legacy to life. Vitalsignswalloffame.com. And we want to thank Gipper, the official social media graphics solution for the podcast. That's Gipper.com. Go to Gipper.com to get started. As always, we appreciate you listening. Come back next time for more Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast.